Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on the U.S. Department of Energy's Long-Duration Energy Storage for Everyone, Everywhere, LDEZ initiative, and the request for information released on May 12th. My name is Ben Schrager, and I'm an engineer in the Office of Electricity supporting the development of the ESEE program alongside my colleagues in the Offices of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy and Clean Energy Demonstrations. We have a packed agenda today and some great speakers to discuss each demonstration program and cross-cutting issues around energy storage demonstrations and technologies. We will have opportunities for questions during our Q&A sessions later between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Time. This WebEx call is being recorded and may be posted on DOE's website or used internally. If you do not wish to have your voice recorded, please do not speak during the call or disconnect now. If you do not wish to have your image recorded, please turn off your camera or participate only by phone. If you speak during the call or use a video connection, you are presumed to consent to recording and to the use of your voice or image. We also want to note you should not plan for this webinar recording to be posted publicly before the request for information closes on June 16th. We are planning to post all slides used today on the registration page at energy.gov. To kick off this event and build some excitement around the bipartisan infrastructure law, we will first hear from Kelly Cummins, Acting Director and Principal Deputy Director for Clean Energy Demonstrations. Kelly, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ben, and it's really exciting to be on this webinar today. It's a pleasure to participate, and I hope that the information provided today will help answer your questions related to this exciting energy storage request for information that's currently open and closes on June 16th. As Ben mentioned, my name is Kelly Cummins, and I'm the Acting Director and the Principal Deputy Director of our newly established Office of Clean Energy Demonstration. And in this role, I am responsible for implementing key multi-billion-dollar projects funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill as we like to call it. And that includes $355 million for energy storage demonstration and pilot grants, as well as $150 million for long duration demonstration initiatives and the joint program. And I'm looking forward to hearing the discussions on those provisions today. But before I turn it back over to the team, I thought I would talk in a little bit more detail about these provisions and share a little bit about the new office that we've created here at the department. So I think many of you know that the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law, passed in November, and it's really a historic investment and the largest change to the Department of Energy since its founding in 1977. This investment is truly significant because it more than triples DOE's annual funding for energy programs, and it significantly expands our research and development capabilities, as well as creates entirely new demonstration and deployment programs. So this funding is really key to the climate necessary energy transition and charting the nation's course towards reaching our goals of 100% pollution-free electricity by 2035, as well as net zero emissions by 2050. Through the bipartisan infrastructure law, Congress has delivered a mandate for us to combat the climate crisis, really to go big on clean energy deployment and to modernize our infrastructure for the 21st century. As part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, the bill also created this Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations and provided more than $21 billion, about a third of the overall funding provided to DOE for this new office to conduct these large-scale demonstration projects. And what we're really focused on is delivering clean energy demonstration projects at scale in partnership with the private sector to accelerate deployment, market adoption, and the equitable transition to a decarbonized energy system. And to achieve this, we are partnering very closely with others in DOE, including the Office of Electricity, as well as with key external stakeholders to build clean energy demonstration projects that will prove the value of these new technologies in the real world and will deliver economic, social, and environmental benefits across the US. The office that I'm running is a technology neutral office that spans many different demonstration types, from hydrogen, clean hydrogen, to carbon capture, to advanced nuclear. But one of the provisions that we're most excited about are these energy storage provisions. And what we're really trying to do is accelerate these technologies from the lab to the market and fill this critical innovation gap on the pathway to our national climate goals. We believe that we have a clear role in commercializing these critical energy technologies developed by DOE energy programs. And we're focused on being the connector between the R&D side of the department and the deployment side, whether that's through the private sector or through programs like the Loan Programs Office. We know that we're going to have to unlock trillions of dollars in private sector follow-on investment to meet our overall goals. So we are focused on engaging with the private sector early and often to maximize the impact of our investments and to hear how industry approaches its business decisions. So I'm glad to see so many of those folks on the call today. Another thing that I would mention about the new office is that we are focused on becoming a center of excellence for demonstration project management oversight. So we're going to be implementing a large portfolio of demonstration projects and helping the department manage the capital-intensive large-scale projects that are needed to meet our overall goals. In addition to our greenhouse gas reduction goals, I would also say that working with the workforce and local communities are a key part of the solutions as we build toward this clean energy future. Today, you'll hear from the team that has been working on these energy storage provisions that will advance energy storage toward widespread commercial deployment by lowering the costs and increasing the duration of energy storage resources. Really, that it's cheaper, longer energy storage is really the key to meeting our long-term goals. And it's going to increase local control of the power system, build resilience for communities, minimize power grid disruptions, and help reach President Biden's goal of 100% clean electricity by 2035. So I think you can tell we're all very excited about these provisions and looking forward to all of the input that we're going to receive through our engagement and through the RFI. So I'm going to turn it back over to Ben and the team to really get this started. So thank you for participating today.
Great. Kelly, thank you so much. It is always energizing hearing your passion for these projects and for your office. We will now hear from Eric Shea, Director of Grid Components and Systems in DOE's Office of Electricity. Eric will give an overview on energy storage deployments and the strategy across the ESEE programs. Eric, when you're ready.
Great. Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you for assembling all of us today to walk through the RFI and the need for these provisions. So let's go straight into a little bit of background about why they're needed. This slide shows the magnitude of the opportunity and challenge for energy storage technologies over the next decade and more. So these blue lines show the actual deployment as of last year or end of 2020 for energy storage on the grid today. The very thin blue line shows batteries, mostly lithium ion, and the larger blue line shows pump storage as of the end of 2020. These next orange boxes show what could be built in the near future. The darker box for batteries by 2030, and the longer orange bar for the pump storage development pipeline available in the United States. Now, contrast with what could be built soon with what would be needed under high decarbonization scenarios. So these shapes show are indicative of the hundreds to perhaps over 1,000 gigawatts of storage that could be needed under a 100% decarbonization scenario for the grid. And then out to 2050, the durations that we would need for storage for a full economy-wide decarbonization scenario are much more than we have today. So to meet these goals, DOE is seeking to support technologies that exhibit significant cost potential, have high materials availability, sufficient performance, society and community benefits, and in many cases, flexible siting independent of geography. As part of these and many bill provisions, DOE is looking for projects and technologies that are consistent with and support the administration's goal of transforming the economy by 2050 to achieve net zero emissions. Now, as part of the long duration storage shot, DOE identified a cost and performance target for storage that would help achieve these decarbonization goals in a cost-effective manner. In short, DOE is looking for technologies that will reduce storage costs by 90% from a 2020 baseline in storage systems that deliver 10 or more hours of duration in 1 decade. And this is part of the long duration storage shot that was launched last year. Now, DOE does define long duration storage as systems capable of delivering 10 or more hours in duration. And this functionality is a key enabler for grid decarbonization and for powering remote communities. Now, on the next slide, DOE is supporting a range of storage technologies, including electrochemical, thermal, and mechanical, that can potentially scale to the power and duration requirements required of this future grid. DOE coordinates its storage activities through the Energy Storage Grand Challenge, and these technologies are supported across many different DOE offices. While a lot of technologies have very low underlying materials cost, business as usual projections show that the cost of full systems may not achieve the storage shot goals in time. So the energy storage programs discussed in this RFI provide the opportunity to accelerate commercialization for some of these technologies by demonstrating the technology scale and partnering with community and industry stakeholders so that they can best adapt and benefit from these technologies. And in selecting these projects, DOE is looking to ensure that there are a range of technologies types supported. So let's go to the provisions and the goals of the provisions on this slide. Key goals of the ESEE initiative include demonstrations. So we want to enable first-of-a-kind technologies at utility scale by mitigating technology risk to potential buyers or off-takers. We want to validate first-of-a-kind technologies. I'm going to prepare a cohort of promising technologies for utility scale demonstrations through lab behind the meter or campus demonstrations that have a pathway to the storage shot 90% cost reduction targets. And we want to pilot technologies in a way that builds enduring capabilities, such as institutional, analytical, financial, or others, for targeted communities to invest in storage resources that provide local benefits. And we'd also are seeking to demonstrate technologies that increase the resilience of DoD and DOE facilities. I will touch on a couple things that are not part of these provisions. So first, these provisions do not include support for domestic manufacturing. Entities interested in manufacturing should take a look at the battery materials processing and battery manufacturing programs, which is currently open. Also, these provisions are not intended for commercial deployment of mature technologies, sort of like what a production tax credit or investment tax credit might support. And then finally, these provisions are not intended to include hydrogen or generator flexibility technologies. These technologies are included within the scope of the overall energy storage grant challenge, but DOE is proposing to redirect such technologies to either the hydrogen-specific provisions in the bill or the generation-specific technologies in the bill. And there are references on what those other provisions are within the RFI. So let's go to the next slide. To carry out this program, to carry out any program, DOE needs to have both programmatic statutory authority and available appropriations. Section 32(1) of the Energy Act of 2020 is a programmatic statutory authority for several programs shown here related to energy storage demonstrations. The appropriations came from Section 41001 of the bill, which authorized the funding shown here to carry out these programs. So the bill appropriated $355 million to carry out the ESEE validation and ESEE piloting program, and another $150 million to carry out the ESEE demonstration and ESEE resilience programs. Through the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2022, Congress also appropriated an additional $20 million for a subtopic under ESEE validation, which will be covered in more detail in the second part of this webinar. So as Kelly mentioned up front, the bill programs fill a gap between core DOE R&D and deployment-focused efforts. So to the left so this graph shows how these ESEE provisions fit in between DOE's core R&D and continued market efforts. So to develop these provisions includes earlier stage R&D activities supported through DOE's technology office's energy storage activities. And these activities go up to what we're calling concept design, where technologies are validated in the lab at a small scale, such as less than 10 kilowatts. The numbers on the bottom show the storage technology opportunity readiness evaluation scale, or STOR scale. And while it's similar to other maturity scales like TRL, STOR describes energy storage technology specifically, and we have proposed it here intending to differentiate the expected stages of a storage technology maturity for these bill programs. So the first area of interest is at the prototype demonstration stage for ESEE demonstration. The stage targets 50 to 100 kilowatt size systems to be tested under controlled environments. Systems at this stage should contain sufficient integration, controls, and power conversion equipment for low voltage, which is up to 1,000 volts, input and output in a moderately complex environment, like a campus microgrid. The second area of interest is at the utility scale validation stage under ESEE validation. This stage targets first-of-a-kind systems larger than 5 megawatts to be deployed in the field or grid connected. Systems at this stage should include plans for sufficient integration, controls, and power conversion equipment for medium voltage, so up to 20 kilovolts, AC input and output to the bulk power system, and they need to be prepared to comply with all applicable reliability, market, and operational requirements. The third area of interest is at the market creation stage under ESEE pilot. The stage targets technologies to be validated in its target application or to facilitate institutional reforms. Systems at this stage may utilize technologies that have been fully commercialized for applications other than the target application here. And finally, the last portion that we'll discuss today is ROVI, the Rapid Operational Validation Initiative, which is envisioned as a cross-cutting analytical framework that will support faster validation of technologies currently developed throughout DOE. I'll also note that DOE is implementing the ESEE Resilience Program in consultation with the Department of Defense and is not seeking input on that program at this time. But there are other bill provisions that include resilience as a focus area and for which storage is an eligible technology, such as the Building a Better Grid initiative. And so before I leave this slide, I'll note that DOE is seeking input on the clarity of the STOR scale and how clearly an applicant might be able to find and know which program or solicitation to apply to. And we're also interested in learning about what specific metrics or criteria that should be added to the scale to make it more robust, clear, or identify what technologies and maturity levels fit into which provisions. Now to talk about the schedule. This figure outlines a proposed timeline for executing each of the 4 provisions. The resilience program will be split between DOE and DoD facilities. And then the validation and demo programs following this RFI and workshop stage. These 2 are expected to proceed to the FOA stage in tandem later this year. Given the wide potential for creativity, DOE is considering developing an initial prize stage or competition for ideas on how eligible entities could use the ESEE piloting program to leverage funds for demonstrations. DOE may then incorporate the prize-winning ideas into 1 or more distinct solicitations. So a note about outreach. You are here because we presume you're interested in more information on the RFI that was released on May 12th, and that includes the 3 initiatives here under ESEE, demonstration, validation, and piloting. And it has extensive questions on program-specific considerations and cross-cutting issues. The RFI also includes a section on workforce development and equity, environmental, and energy justice issues, which you'll hear from shortly. And DOE plans further engagement and listening sessions after this webinar. Finally, I did mention There are many other provisions that are currently in progress at DOE, and you can find updates on all of those opportunities at energy.gov/bill. With that, I can hand it back to Ben.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. We will now take a closer look at one of those programs, ESEE Resilience. As Eric mentioned, this program is not explicitly asked about in the RFI, but it still plays an important role in validating innovative new technologies. Vinod Saiberry, engineer in the Office of Electricity, will share more. Vinod, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Ben. So we can go ahead to the next slide. So this program is authorized in section 41001B2 of the bill and is referred to as the joint program. There is $150 million allocated to sections 41001B1 and B2 combined, and up to this point, DOE leadership has decided to evenly split this amount and allocate $75 million to this resilience provision. The purpose of this provision, as expressed in the bill, is the following. Initiative that directs DOE in consultation with Department of Defense to leverage existing infrastructure at DoD and DOE facilities/military installations to demonstrate long-duration energy storage technologies. Through these demonstrations, the Department of Energy will help new innovative technologies increase their commercial viability under a variety of operating conditions and system scales. As noted earlier, we anticipate that this program will target technology maturity levels across the store scale. Some additional statutory requirements for this program outlined in the bill text include selected projects should consider deployments that operate in a variety of environments that have different physical and market constraints. Selected projects should cover systems at different scales with a balance of larger and higher cost and smaller and lower cost systems. Goals and metrics consistent with energy resilience and security policies will be developed to track technological progress under this program. Projects will be carried out in the field and will prioritize making information available to the public with the objective of accelerating a deployment of long-duration energy storage technologies. Projects will leverage existing testbed infrastructure at DOE facilities and DoD installations and can use funding to develop new infrastructure if appropriate. So we can move on to the next slide. So I'll wrap up with what the current status of this program is. And as a reminder, this program does not have any specific questions in the RFI, as the primary recipients of funding will be either DOE or DoD/military organizations. Currently, entities within the Department of Defense and Department of Energy are coordinating to sign a memorandum of understanding that will establish the groundwork for carrying out the rest of this program. To carry out the DOE portion of this program, we are considering conducting a lab call funding mechanism that will allow DOE national labs to competitively compete for funding. So appreciate everyone's attention and the short summary on this, and now I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Great. Thanks, Vinod. So stay tuned for more information on the ESEE Resilience Program. We will now hear from Christy Veder, Senior Advisor in the Office of Energy Jobs, who will share more information on the important role that workforce development and expanding union jobs plays in the ESEE program and our RFI. Christy, over to you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everyone, for the chance to be with you here today. We've heard a lot of really interesting and insightful specifics about the technical details of this program. I think it would be great to just zoom out for a moment and talk a little bit about the overarching goals for this and you know, all the energy storage efforts that are in the bipartisan infrastructure law and the bipartisan infrastructure law itself. Next slide, please, Ben. Thank you. It is not an overstatement to underscore the fact that this is truly a once-in-a-generation investment for the agency. Everything that Kelly discussed in her opening remarks is very true. This is a historic moment in terms of what DOE is able to do across the energy landscape in America. And in recognition of that, there are a number of really large and important goals that we're aiming for incorporating into every single bill provision, and very much this one. And as you know, as we look over these, I think you'll immediately see how closely the energy storage ideas that I know you're all interested in and have become experts in and have been focused for so long are represented and connected with the ideas here. For all parts of the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're hoping that they come together to provide strengthening at all different levels and in all different ways for the economy, all across the economy. All the different parts of our bipartisan infrastructure law provisions are also intended to help advance US competitiveness on the international stage. In strengthening regional economies, especially in terms of supply chain resilience, is essential to how we roll out all different parts of our bipartisan infrastructure law provisions. And also really important is ensuring that more folks, and especially people in marginalized communities, rural communities, underserved communities, are able to benefit as much as possible from all the good things that are going to come out of the implementation of these different provisions. And as many of you have probably heard from different communications from the White House and other federal agencies, and certainly Secretary Granholm, supporting worker empowerment and enabling the creation of union jobs is definitely at the forefront of all this as well. All of the different ideas on this slide are connected to each other. They all need each other. And the importance of achieving these interlocking goals is especially clear in the context of current world events. That being said, these things, have been just as important in the years leading up to this moment, and they're going to continue to be important for a long time to come. Next slide, please, Ben. Jobs in particular are a really essential part of meeting those overarching goals. It's a key part of the administration's priorities, and jobs have been an essential part of meeting DOE's mission of strengthening economic prosperity, which is what the agency has been charged to do ever since its founding in 1977. The items in the second bullet are things that we're looking into incorporate into all of DOE's bill provisions in different ways to the maximum extent possible. We're looking to find all the different kinds of ways that we can support good paying jobs with worker voice, incorporating as strong labor standards as our different stakeholders can create. We also are looking for different ways to support all different kinds of high road workforce development programs, making sure that the jobs that are created through the infrastructure law are available to all workers, especially workers who have had a harder time getting into those job tracks and career tracks in previous years and generations. That's something that we think is really important now and going forward. And using things or lifting up tools like registered apprenticeships and quality pre-apprenticeship programs, we think will also be a really valuable and effective part of meeting these overarching good jobs objectives. Two particular tools that have already appeared in some of our funding opportunity announcements across the agency, and will certainly be appearing in more funding opportunities, are project labor agreements and community benefits agreements. As some of you may be familiar with, project labor agreements are pre-hire collective bargaining agreements that lay out the terms and conditions for work and wages and benefits on construction projects, typically, medium to larger size construction projects. They have been shown to be effective in terms of resolving disputes harmoniously across large complex projects with lots of contractors and subcontractors. They are valuable for making sure that workers are paid good wages and feel motivated and confident about being able to complete the project on time, and they tend to be able to allow projects to be completed with minimal labor interruptions. Community benefits agreements are agreements that are legally binding, that are negotiated between community coalitions and project developers, enabling everyone in the community to come together to identify the needs and resources and available workforce within the community and match those in an optimal way to the project that the project developer is looking to cite. And those can be really effective for creating place-based solutions for how best a new project can be created in a community, and also for providing public support for the development of that project. So those are a range of the different good jobs, quality jobs tools that we've been thinking about and are looking to include in future bill provisions. We're very interested in hearing from you about if you think these ideas are effective, if there are other ways in which we can be lifting up good jobs in the context of the energy storage challenge. Any and all ideas that you have on this, we're very eager to hear in your RFI responses. Next slide, please, Ben. So getting into that in more specificity, there are a range of different questions on workforce that are in the RFI that you may have seen. These all get at different parts of the question of how are we going to achieve the overarching goals that I talked about a couple slides ago. The different questions ask things like what tools and practices can ensure that the jobs associated with the rollout of 41001 are good jobs. Information that you may have to share with us about estimates or forecasts of the number and types and quality of jobs that will be created, through the particular implementation of this provision, but also across the larger energy storage landscape. We're interested in hearing about what kinds of engagement with different kinds of stakeholders or learning institutions can help maximize the level of inclusiveness that's able to be to take place on this provision. We want to see how far we can go in terms of bringing in staffers, workers, people at the professional level, people who are doing the hard labor in all parts of these projects. And we're very interested in all your creative thinking on that. Also, any and all ideas about where organized labor can be included or supported in this process. And definitely also what types of workforce development efforts can be really impactful for making sure that these energy storage demos and pilots are successful. I think more than the specifics of these questions, what I encourage you to think about in responding to this part of the RFI is what are all the ways that we can be thinking about workforce in order to meet the larger goals that we want to characterize all of our implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law, to meet the goals of supporting workers, creating good opportunities, lifting up communities that are in marginalized areas or have been struggling in different ways, and bringing everyone along with us on the incredible groundbreaking work that's going to happen through this provision and many other provisions. So thank you very much for considering this. I'm sure there'll be more discussion during the later part of the webinar. Thank you for your attention. Ben, happy to hand it back to you.
Great. Christy, thank you so much. That's really, really insightful and informative. Appreciate it. So now we'll go to our final speaker for the first hour. We will hear from Anjali Jane Figueroa, Fellow with the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, and she will discuss the critical role of equity, environmental, and energy justice in clean energy and storage deployments. Anjali, when you're ready. Hey, Anjali, I think you're still on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As I mentioned, my name is Angela Jane Figueroa. I'm in the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, and I'm going to talk about equity, environmental, and energy justice. Next slide, please. So this program is called the Long Duration Energy Storage for Everyone Everywhere, and I want to focus on the for everyone piece. Because it's bill funded and bill is trying to advance the principles of equity, environment, and environmental justice, it's really reinforcing some of the administration's commitments to ensuring that overburdened and underserved or underrepresented and marginalized communities have access to federal resources. So you might be a group that hasn't worked with the Department of Energy before, and that's what we're looking for, trying to ensure that people that maybe haven't worked with DOE can also participate in a meaningful way. And this is done through a variety of executive orders, and I want to focus on one in particular, EO 14008, which is called Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad, and it discusses Justice 40, which is what I'll primarily discuss. But I want to make a few points first. Next slide, please. The real goal, the big challenge that DOE is facing is how to transform the energy system. As Kelly mentioned, we're trying to decarbonize the entire system, but we want to do that while ensuring that it becomes more equitable and just. Next slide, please. Our current system has many inequities. Next slide, please. We see this, for example, in the legacy of mining, energy drilling, and pollution. And here I'm showing the industrial corridor in the Bay Area where I used to live, and you can see the polluter impact and the asthma emergency room visits. And if you dig deeper into the demographics of that area, you see that it's primarily Black and Latino communities that are suffering some of these health impacts. Next slide, please. We also know that these are systemic and disproportionate. Next slide, please. And we see this time and time again. For example, with resilience, populations that are primarily minorities suffer more blackouts, and the presence of critical infrastructure doesn't explain the full disparity. Next slide, please. And the differences don't have to be only racial. We see this also across other categories. For example, renters versus landlords. This is showing Harris County during the winter storm in Texas. And you can see that renters experienced longer power outages. Next slide, please. So what we want is to move towards a more equitable, just system that is based on the tenets of environmental and energy justice. And to create a common baseline, I just want to define some of these terms. So environmental justice is really about the fair and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulation, and policies. And when you talk about it, you can really think about these four pillars as creating a framework or a lens to ask particular questions. For example, what is the decision-making process like? Is it transparent? Who's included? Is it perceived as fair? How do we allocate or distribute resources or products? Is it by need, opportunity, location, merit? It reflects the perceived fairness of the outcome. Who in the process gets recognized or is given respect? This reflects the perceived fairness of treatment. And all of this happens within a context of a specific location, a specific history, which may have environmental or social harms. A recognition to not exacerbate or the ability to repair some of the harms that have been done in the past includes part of the restorative justice. Next slide, please. And so energy justice is really looking at the equity, social, and economic participation in the energy system, and it aims to center the concerns of frontline communities. We want to be able to make energy accessible, affordable, clean, and democratically managed for all communities. And it's intertwined with environmental justice and climate justice. As we saw, climate issues will exacerbate some of these, so these are all linked. And the current energy system hasn't achieved this vision, but we're trying to integrate it into how we design new programs, such as the ones that are supported by bill. Next slide, please. So Justice 40 is a framework that can help us in the transition towards a more just energy system. Next slide, please. So what is Justice 40? Justice 40 really looks at how federal investments might be made such that 40% of overall benefits flow to disadvantaged communities. So if you try to unpack that, there's several terms that have to be defined. First, what federal investments, what is covered? Then how do we define these benefits? and how do we calculate that target? And then when we say it flows to a disadvantaged community, what do we mean by disadvantaged community? So I'm going to try to unpack this a little bit in the effort that DOE has been going through to unpack this regulation. Keep going. Next slide, please. So what does Justice 40 cover? So federal investments relate to any type of grant or procurement, financing, or staffing costs, any provision of goods and services in the areas of climate change, clean energy and energy efficiency, clean transportation, affordable and sustainable housing, training and workforce development, remediation of legacy pollution, clean water and waste infrastructure. So a lot of the bill programs that DOE is implementing fall under the first two, climate change and clean energy and energy efficiency. Most of them also have a component of training and workforce development. Many of them will touch on many of these areas. Next slide, please. In this, defining disadvantaged communities, we can split two words. So community can be defined either as a group of individuals living in a geographic proximity to one another, or geographically dispersed set of individuals where they share a common experience by common conditions. So these might be Native American tribes or migrant workers or groups such as those. Next slide, please. For DOE, in defining the disadvantage aspect, we focused on cumulative burden. So we looked at all census tracts in the U.S. and identified those that had at least 30% low-income households that ranked in the 80th percentile of cumulative sum of these 36 indicators. These indicators represent things that either have or pose an environmental hazard, things like these are particulates, high cancer rates, traffic. They can identify vulnerable populations. For example, I showed the example of renters, but these might be things like food deserts, job access, low income, either elderly or uninsured or disabled. They also represent places that have high energy burdens or have high fossil dependence, so that when they make the energy transition, we can aid in that. Next slide, please. In undergoing this analysis, we found that of nearly 75,000 tracts in the U.S., about 18% fit under this definition of cumulative burden for DACs. In addition, by using the second definition of community, we have 703 Native populations, and we include all U.S. territories. Next slide, please. And finally, when we're looking at the aspect of benefits, what counts, we identified 8 policy priorities. These are things we would like to see in these areas that are identified as disadvantaged. We would like to see a decrease in energy burden, so making energy more affordable. We'd like to decrease environmental exposures and burdens so that we don't see these disproportionate harms, particularly with health impacts. And then we'd like to see increased parity in clean energy technologies, so adoption of renewables. We'd like to see increase in access to low-cost capital, so more access to financing. We'd like to see increase in clean energy enterprise creation, the ability to have more small businesses, which are part of the economic engine of the U.S. We want to increase clean energy jobs, like as was discussed in the previous presentation. We want to increase energy resilience, and we want to increase energy democracy. This includes community ownership. Next slide, please. So we analyzed a lot of the programs that already exist and created a framework where we can try to track a specific metric and attach it to one of these benefit categories. And we want this to be something measurable, something that DOE can track. Next slide, please. When we think of the benefits of energy storage, one of the big advantages is that it really is an enabling technology. So we can think of storage, if done properly, as an equity asset. It facilitates renewables, it allows access to clean energy, it helps manage peak demands, so it can affect how we change or how people pay for their energy. It can reduce utility disconnections, giving a system of generator or support reliability by having backup power. It can generate community wealth. It can mitigate outages. So it has a lot of benefits. And what we hope is that by fitting them into this kind of J40 framework, we can really provide a structure for measuring with the outcomes that we looked at in terms of the policy priorities. So access, affordability, resilience, and jobs. Next slide, please. So with this kind of framework, we can really think about the RFI. We see this not just for Bill generally, but specifically for this program. And we can ask questions that relate to EEEJ. We can ask, how can DOE incentivize partnerships with community-based organizations, especially those that have been historically excluded? We can try to ask, how can DOE facilitate applicants' collaboration with financing partners to have access to low-cost capital? We want to understand your EEEJ concerns or priorities. What is most relevant for this program in your community where you live? What metrics should be tracked? What do you think is appropriate, not just greenhouse gas emissions or particulate matter, but what is affecting you in terms of environment, social, and economic impact? How could this program be more accessible to community-owned microgrids or publicly owned utilities or utility cooperatives? What are the specific needs of community ownership models? How can the program be deployed to support communities that are transitioning from fossil fuels? How could they be more accessible to rural, remote, or tribal communities? And how can we really fully engage all small businesses, including minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses? These are some of the questions that you'll find in the RFI. And what we're ultimately asking you are for your ideas to strengthen the EEJ pillars. This is intended to be a framework, but it's a very useful one. And so we hope we can actually get your sense of how DOE can operate better. Thank you. With that, I'll pass it back to Ben.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anjali. Really interesting material, and I just want to echo that we're really excited to hear about your perspectives for these EEEJ priorities and Justice 40. At this time, we will now take a short break, resuming at the top of the hour with the presentation on the demo initiative. I want to again thank all of our speakers so far. It's Kelly, Eric, Vinod, Christy, and Anjali for some really informative and interesting presentations. When we return at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, Sarah Garman, the Director for Strategic Analysis in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, will kick us off and facilitate questions for the 2 hours. We'll have opportunities for public Q&A using the chat box in WebEx. Vinod Saiberry, myself, and Eric Shea will present more details about each program specifically in the RFI, and we look forward to taking your questions. See you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Test, test, test.
Sounded good.
Good afternoon and welcome back. We're here at 2 o'clock and my name is Sarah Garman. I'm the Director for Strategic Analysis in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. And we're going to be working through section by section provisions with an opportunity to hear more of specific details about each provision, followed by a Q&A session that will be facilitated through the WebEx chat. I would first like to introduce our first speaker, Vinod Saiberry from the Office of Electricity, and he will be talking on the demonstration initiative, and we will follow that up with a chat Q&A. Vinod, over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. So as Sarah said, the first provision we're going to be going over is the demo initiative, also referred to as ESEE demonstration. So we can go on to the next slide. All right, so in this provision, we're looking at funding companies innovating in relatively early stage energy storage technology compared to what some of the other provisions might be targeting. We're also considering the anticipated end users behind the meter storage customers, such as campus and facilities owners / operators to be receiving funding under this. So in terms of what we're funding, we're looking at field or behind the meter demonstrations of lab scale technologies sized under 100 kilowatts of power, and also technologies that have in some way been proven at a smaller scale previously. So how we're funding this, we're looking first at using cost share grants and prizes, or really any other mechanisms suggested in the RFI responses that might be especially useful for carrying out this specific provision. And so in summary, the overall end goals for this provision are to fund the demonstration of a cohort of promising technologies that will be deemed suitable for utility scale demonstration. In addition, we also want this to be an opportunity for these technologies to gather sufficient data to accelerate the feasibility for scaled up demonstrations in the future. All right, we can go on to the next slide. So this provision had a pretty limited number of statutory requirements. This slide just covers them briefly. So projects under this provision will be required to ensure a range of different technology types, ensure regional diversity among projects, consider uses in the following applications: bulk power level, distribution power level, behind the meter, microgrid, either grid connected or islanded mode, and off grid. So we can move on. So now we're going to look at our areas of interest that were covered in the RFI and specifically applied to this provision. The first is around our proposed target criteria, and it's the following statement: DOE anticipates that projects in this program will be small, less than 100 kilowatt, lab scale systems that have been proven operational in a controlled behind the meter environment. Such projects will have sufficient integration, controls, and power conversion equipment, if applicable, for low voltage, meaning less than 1,000 volt AC input and output in moderately complex operational conditions. We are interested in hearing feedback on how appropriate it is to target this level of technology maturity for this provision. All right, we can move on to the next slide. The next area of interest is around funding mechanisms and evaluating different options that will consider ways how we can reduce barriers to participation for key communities, such as disadvantaged communities and fossil energy communities in transition. DOE is interested in feedback on how the following mechanisms may contribute or impede to equitable project selection and community engagement. So these are cost share grant awards and cooperative agreements, prize or challenge mechanisms, technical assistance specifically for long duration energy storage, technology investment agreements or partnership intermediary agreements. And we would also like to consider alternate funding mechanisms that are not listed here. So moving on to our next area, this slide covers how we're evaluating inclusion of specific project requirements and allocation of funding to ensure we achieve the overall program objectives in a meaningful way. We're interested in feedback or insights on the following aspects: sufficient size of an individual award across different scale demonstrations, what a portfolio of successful projects would look like in terms of things such as the technology, use case, or type of community engagement, and how success could be measured. Use cases or applications for long duration energy storage that would be suitable for a low maturity technology. Then the pathway to a levelized cost of storage of 5 cents a kilowatt hour cycle for demonstrated technology or other metrics that will indicate progress toward market viability. Technologies or technology families that would be most applicable for this. Regional factors such as market policy, environmental justice, and workforce, and partnerships that should be considered, and then requiring specific project milestones or using go, no-go points in the project. And we can go to the next slide. This slide covers two areas of interest. The first, considering how we can effectively leverage partnerships. We are interested in feedback and insights on what types of partnerships will be most critical for a project funded by this opportunity. Examples include labor unions and other workforce organizations, and also organizations that engage entrepreneurs or innovators in underserved communities. The second area here that we're interested in is understanding how Justice 40 initiative goals can be incorporated potentially through selection criteria, as well as what relevant data should be collected throughout the life of the project. In that same vein, we're also considering how an equity, justice, and benefits paper could be an element of a proposal that could help demonstrate the anticipated benefits to disadvantaged/negatively impacted communities. So we'll move on to our, this is our last area of interest for feedback. So our last area of interest is around feedback or insights on what considerations should be given to manufacturing and supply chain needs for a technology used in this project. This includes considering things like availability of a domestic, secure, and ethical source of material, ability to use underutilized manufacturing capacity, including buildings and infrastructure, speed at which manufacturing can be scaled to meet future demand, types of analysis that an applicant could provide to demonstrate the above considerations. We're also interested in understanding what kinds of cybersecurity considerations, opportunities, barriers, and metrics might be most relevant to this specific program. So we can go on to the next slide. Yeah, I think before we get into our Q&A for this provision, just provide some general reminders about the RFI. So the RFI is available at that eere-exchange.energy.gov URL. The responses are due no later than 5 p.m. Eastern Time on June 16th, 2022. Submit responses to the Energy Storage 41001 RFI at ee.doe.gov email with subject line Bill 41001 response. Responses must be provided as a Microsoft Word document or an Adobe PDF attachment. Please copy and paste the RFI questions, and this one is very important for us to receive all of these. Please include the question numbering and use them as a template for your response. Respondents may answer as many or as few questions as they wish. DOE will not pay for information provided under this RFI, and no project will be supported as a result of this RFI. Information collected from this RFI will be used by DOE for planning purposes. DOE does not intend to publish any information collected in response to this RFI, but respondents are strongly advised to not provide proprietary, business sensitive, or confidential information.
Great, thanks, Vinod. We've reached the Q&A portion for this presentation, so feel free to type any questions you might have into the chat. Okay, coming in fast, excellent. Is hydrogen included in this? I think we covered that in the first hour, but happy to have someone reiterate the answer to that.
So hydrogen is anticipated to be covered by other build provisions, which I think the link was shared with that in the first hour of the presentation. So it is not anticipated to be covered in these energy storage provisions.
Great. Some questions on timing about when the FOA will follow the RFI.
I think, Eric, based on the master schedule that we had, you remember if there was an anticipated date for when a FOA would come out for this?
No, not this time.
Not this time. Okay.
Great. There's a question here noting that some Native American tribes presently utilize gaming casinos as part of their economic activities. How might they be compared to other applicants in regards to demonstration projects? Could then be more broadly applicable to other economically disadvantaged communities?
I can take a stab at this one. That'd be helpful. So these types of regional factors, these metrics, that's right in line with some of the questions that we're asking. So how exactly we'll be evaluating applicants on some of these factors, some of these maybe very regional specific factors, that's of great interest to us. So we really want to hear like some of those perspectives. That's exactly what we want to be seeing for some of those questions in the RFI. I don't know if Eric or Vinod want to add anything.
Okay, here's a good one. I usually see the levelized cost of storage as $1 per kilowatt hour, not $1 per kilowatt cycle. In the RFI, there's a link to more info on this metric, but it's a 12-page, not straightforward document. How do we ensure everyone is calculating this consistently?
So I can provide, so we are interested in feedback on what level of analysis is appropriate to ask of applicants in terms of substantiating a pathway to this LCOS. We're also interested in what alternate approaches other than LCOS that might be indicative of the cost reduction potential for a technology. So I think to the extent that people have feedback on the clarity of the methodology or what other metrics might be useful, we welcome those comments.
Okay. What is the power capacity the DOE is targeting for the demo initiative?
So the power capacity, we're thinking under 100 kilowatts of power for this one. And then I think there's a question about why do we need to limit the size to 100 kilowatt hours. So I think the way we're breaking this up is sort of we're using these kilowatt sort of guiding metrics to differentiate how each of these provisions will touch on different areas of the store scale and technology maturity. So for this demo initiative, since our target is more of these lab scale demonstrations, that's sort of our like general guiding metric there. But of course, we're open to feedback on why that may or may not be effective.
Great. If we prove a technology within 6 to 12 months, will there still be an opportunity for demonstrations?
So yeah, I could take a crack at that one. So I don't think at this point we really can answer that without opportunity to release. I think there's nothing, however, that would explicitly exclude something like that at this point, though.
Great. Several technologies are suitable to repower existing fossil plants. For example, thermal energy storage, replacing the boiler at a coal plant and turning it into a storage plant. No emissions, just reusing the steam turbine and generator. Would this approach be included in this RFI?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. This might be a question that could potentially be more applicable in maybe one of the other provisions. So maybe we can circle back to that.
So I think you may want to look at some of the other provisions, but also if that technology does have a pathway to our long duration storage shot targets, then we are seeking a range of technologies, including bidirectional thermal.
Okay. Is the 150 million to be split across demonstration and resilience, or is the 150 million only to cover demonstration?
It's being split across the demo initiative and resilience.
Is there an expectation that less than 100 kilowatt demonstrations will be grid connected?
I think that's TBD, but we'd like to sort of hear about what the pros and cons of requiring something like that would be in the RFI. I think that would definitely be helpful.
Is DOE anticipating that all demo initiatives would be complete operating LDS systems, or would component R&D that meets the less than 100 kilowatt requirement be considered?
So we're proposing that projects in this stage have enough integration controls and power conversion equipment for AC input and output, and so any costs to develop that should be part of the overall project. And then just to touch on the previous question about the under 100 kilowatt demonstrations being grid connected, it's envisioned that they should operate in a moderately complex environment like a campus microgrid, but not necessarily connected to the bulk power system. And again, we're seeking comments on those.
Great. Where should we direct feedback on the levelized cost of storage calculation? Do you plan on including disposal costs in these calculations?
So that's a good question. We welcome the comment on how to include disposal costs in LCOS. I would say for the demo provisions, this one specifically, please direct your feedback to question 2E, where we talk about levelized costs of storage calculations. Sorry, 1E. So yeah, for demo provisions, and then for the next provision, which we'll cover shortly, that question is 2H. So when you submit your feedback, please use those numbers so we know how to categorize that feedback.
Great. Sorry, there's a lot of questions coming in. Is subsurface energy storage part of the initiative?
So I'll repeat what we said up front. The DOE is seeking to support a wide range of technologies, and we're proposing to use these technology neutral metrics like levelized cost of storage and other supply chain criteria as the primary factor, primary evaluation criteria.
Okay. Would using the National Opportunity Zone mapping be a good guide for disadvantaged community locations?
So I personally am not familiar with that, I guess, data source, but I think that would be a great thing to sort of bring up in the RFI as somewhere to look for that sort of information.
Just to highlight as well, I shared in the chat a little while ago some of the links that Anjali shared in her presentation on disadvantaged communities and Justice 40. So those resources come from DOE and would be a great guide as you think about this question as well.
Okay. Can you please elaborate on the x-axis on slide 9? You mentioned it's similar to TRL. How is it different from TRL? Do you have a definition?
So that's the store scale, I believe. We have clear definitions in the RFI for each section, essentially. So we didn't put them in the slides directly, but they're in the document and reference back to that same commercialization curve and clear definitions for each one.
We have a couple questions about funding opportunities here. Funding opportunities for new and development technologies are mostly ready to deploy technologies, and do you expect to have that sort of R&D funding available earlier than these September 23 calls for the demo initiative so that projects can be in place for the demos?
So we can't talk about any future R&D activities. What I would recommend is that people monitor or subscribe to the Energy Storage Grant Challenge mailing list, or monitor the funding opportunities page there. We can drop a link in the chat, and that's where the storage opportunities across the department will be posted when they're public.
Okay. One of the criteria is the pathway to low cost. How does DOE plan to use a successful demo initiative to evaluate cost projection pathways? Since there's a lot of uncertainty in cost projections from lab scale to commercial scale.
Right. So one of the questions we ask is, what is reasonable to request from applicants in terms of what is a sufficient amount of information to ask from an applicant to substantiate a pathway to the levelized cost of storage goals. So we're interested in knowing, what an applicant might be able to provide in order to show the likelihood, timeline, and major milestones they would have to achieve these cost reductions.
Great. We have a similar follow-on cost question. The LCOS needed to be economically viable will be very different if it's a 10-hour versus 100-hour storage technology. Does DOE anticipate using just one LCOS number for all durations?
Right. I'll point to question 2G within the RFI, which says that DOE is defining long duration storage systems as capable of delivering 10 or more hours in duration. And DOE is considering evaluating technologies for use on a daily diurnal cycle. So 10 hours really should be regarded as the floor. We do ask if there are other use cases or applications that would be relevant for an applicant applying to these projects. That's something we would consider.
Great. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, Sandia National Labs is adjacent to an Air Force base. They are connected to the grid that supplies much of New Mexico and part of Arizona, including the Navajo Nation. How do you visualize a demonstration project that will fulfill the goals you have described equitably to all?
Yeah, so I can take this. We're really not able to comment on very specific proposals right now or sort of specific ideas. But I just want to reiterate again that generally for the demo initiative, we're looking at a small scale behind the meter systems. There's still a lot of flexibility in what exactly that could look like. As Eric mentioned, sort of a complex operating environment is of interest right now. And beyond that, we're certainly interested in hearing sort of the broadest and most creative ways that we could apply that strategy.
Great. This is on the other end, a more specific question. What is the target power capacity for the validation demo projects in addition to 10 plus hours of storage?
So I guess just reiterating for this one, the target power capacity is under 100 kilowatts. But if you're asking about the validation provision, then we'll sort of touch on that in the upcoming presentations.
Great. Is cybersecurity considered or desired to be a part of this, or will that be addressed separately?
So yeah, that's one of the questions that we have is for something like this early stage, is there a way that we can sort of consider how cybersecurity and similar things can be sort of integrated into a project and addressed? So yeah, we would definitely like to hear some feedback on that.
Is there a connection between the ESEE program and the Energy Storage Grand Challenge? Will information from one be available to the other?
So the within DOE, the ESEE program is being coordinated through the Energy Storage Grand Challenge, which is it's both an overarching coordinating structure for all of these storage related activities. And one of the main goals of the Energy Storage Grand Challenge is the long duration storage shot goals of the 90% cost reduction for 10 plus hour duration systems. And these demo projects are being contemplated to accelerate technologies that have a pathway to achieve those goals. And definitely the results of these demo programs would be used to further inform future activities of the Energy Storage Grand Challenge.
Right. The LCOS will depend on the duty cycle. Do you have a detailed duty cycle in mind?
So we're considering a diurnal cycle that would follow the calculation methodologies that were developed by ARPA-E in the link that's posted under question 1H. But we are seeking feedback on if that's appropriate and what alternative approaches or metrics would also be useful.
Many LDS systems will have best performance cost if hybridized with a thermal power generator, fossil or otherwise. Will potential for integration be considered when evaluating various technologies?
So we are, in the RFI, we are proposing that technologies that are more focused on generator flexibility be redirected to other provisions that are more specific to generation technology.
I'm not sure I totally understand the context in this one, but this is probably our last question for this session. Can you participate in the RFI as a funder?
I would say we welcome comments from anyone in the industry, and if there's a particular question about if someone was eligible to submit comments, I would recommend that they submit a question through the RFI email.
Great. And there's the last question. We have a contact info for the presenters for follow-up questions, clarifications, expanding on this. That will be our last question for this section, so we can stay on time.
So we recommend any feedback, questions, and then especially comments on the specific questions in the RFI to be sent to the RFI inbox, which is energy storage 41001 RFI at ee.doe.gov.
Great, thanks, Eric. We are at 2:30 Eastern, so we're going to move on to the next section here. I'd like to reintroduce Ben Schrager from the Office of Electricity to go through the demo projects. We'll follow the same format here, where Ben will give a brief overview of the provisions, and then we'll pause and do Q&A via the chat. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Sarah, and excited to be back to share some more details about our next very exciting provision. All right, so we just heard from Vinod on the Demo Initiative program, which targets these lower maturity technologies, technologies that are possibly very innovative and very exciting, but still have a lot of technology risk that need to be pared down with some validation. Demo projects brings us to the next level. And demo projects bridges the gap between those earlier stage technologies and technologies that are ready for broader deployment. It does this with first of a kind utility scale demonstrations. So these will be large, both in terms of size and cost, funded projects that are comprised of partnerships across energy storage vendors, EPC firms, off-takers, and potentially a wide array of other partners, from approving authorities to financiers or material developers. We're looking for sort of large partnerships to make these large-scale demonstrations happen for the first time. While we're funding under demo projects, we are funding at least 3 first-of-a-kind utility-scale demos. We've already received this question a number of times. The RFI language says 3. We are funding at least 3. So one of our questions is, with a certain amount of funds, what is a reasonable number that we could be looking at? How big should one award size or one project be? But I just want to say again, we are looking for at least 3 first-of-a-kind utility-scale demos by September 2023. That is a statutory requirement that we have to have these awards out the door by then. And there are 3 required projects, which I'll get more into on the next slide. In terms of funding mechanisms, we're looking at a wide array of both traditional and creative funding mechanisms to optimize the use of our funds and make these projects happen in sort of a broader way. And ultimately, we're going for deploying innovative, first-of-a-kind technologies at utility scale, which might not otherwise proceed given potential technology risk. This is really crossing that final technology risk hurdle for these large-scale, utility-scale demonstrations. So once again, I mentioned these 3 required projects, and I want to dig in a little more. These 3 projects must be funded by September 30th, 2023. And these are required in statute. So this is what Congress told us that we have to fund, at the very least, with this program. One project must be for weekly or monthly durations, which the text defines as 10 to 100 hours at a minimum, or seasonal durations. So we're seeing this system as an innovative, very long duration storage technology. At least one of the projects must demonstrate second life applications of EV batteries. So EV batteries at their end of life redeployed in a stationary grid application. And finally, Eric mentioned this earlier, there's an additional 20 million that's separate from the bill funding that we just received in the fiscal year 22 appropriations for an energy storage project that is US controlled, US made, and North American sourced and supplied. Specifically, we're asked to consider long cycle life lithium grid scale batteries and their components. So these are the 3 required projects, but again, we're looking to fund at least 3, and other projects that are still within the technology criteria are considered in scope, and we're interested in them at this stage. So thinking about the target criteria, this is again roughly in line with the store scale definition for where demo projects falls, but we're looking at deploying first-of-a-kind technologies that can discharge energy for a duration of greater than 10 hours and have that pathway to a levelized cost of storage of 5 cents a kilowatt hour cycle by 2030. Again, first-of-a-kind megawatt-scale systems with all of the necessary integration, controls, power conversion equipment, and interconnection to the bulk power system. So we mentioned that for demo initiative, connection to the bulk power system might not be necessary. For demo projects, we are envisioning an interconnected system. So, but we're still interested for feedback on this level of maturity. This is the first question in the R5 for this section. So we want to hear from you on what you think of this target criteria. So moving on, we do ask about some mechanisms. So I mentioned that we're considering more traditional mechanisms like cost share grants and cooperative agreements, but we're also looking for new and exciting mechanisms that still fit within the program, including offtake agreements, anchor tenants, TIAs and PIAs, as well as other exciting ideas that are not listed. We really want to hear from you both on what mechanisms we could consider and how much funds would have to go per mechanism or per award size for maximum impact. Next, we are looking at a range of other exciting aspects and factors that'll play into these demonstrations. So as I mentioned, we're looking for sufficient award sizes of individual awards. We're looking for what a portfolio of successful projects looks like. We already have those 3 required projects, but what else? What else does success look like for those projects specifically and generally across this entire demo projects program? We're looking for use cases and applications for the 10+ hours long duration storage, pathways to the levelized cost of storage that's similar to what we were just talking about with demo initiative, technologies and technology families that are most applicable, regional factors, and specific project milestones. So really across the board, we're interested in all aspects of deployment and of technology development for this program. So we're also, again, interested in workforce and Justice 40. Christy and Anjali gave some great presentations earlier, talking generally about these considerations, and we have whole sections devoted to them in the RFI. But for demo projects specifically, we certainly want to hear about how we can better foster partnerships across labor unions and workforce organizations, working with organizations that work with underserved communities, and also, of course, equity and environmental justice and how those goals play into the goals of demo projects. So final areas of interest, we are interested in supply chain, so how we can ensure a domestic, secure, and ethical source of materials. This is a big priority for DOE and the Energy Storage Grand Challenge. So other manufacturing factors as well. And cybersecurity. So we are interested in cybersecurity considerations, opportunities, barriers, and metrics. So I know that might differ depending on technology type or deployment, but we're still very interested in hearing your thoughts on cybersecurity for deployment at this scale. Some final reminders. This might be some repeat information for some of you, but once again, we're looking for responses by June 16th. That's next Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. Submitting to the email box that's listed there. Please, please, please include the question numbering in your responses. So when you submit your responses, you might have many pages, which is great. But if you're not able, if you don't organize your responses based on what question you're answering, that's going to make our job of sorting through your feedback a lot more difficult. So please denote which question you are answering when you write down your response. And just a few other final reminders. You can answer as many or as few questions as you wish. You can submit a response with one question answered. That's fine. We're just interested in whatever you're able to answer. We will not pay for information provided under the RFI, and no project will be supported as a result of the RFI. Information will be collected for planning purposes, and we do not intend to publish any information collected, but you are strongly advised against providing proprietary, business-sensitive, or confidential information. And the RFI language discusses some of that more in detail. So that's demo projects at a glance, and I'm already seeing some questions come in, and Sarah can guide us through them. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Ben. So we have first a question. Where can we get detail on TIAs and PIAs?
Okay, I can drop a link into the chat to a document that talks about the partnership intermediary agreements.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Of the 3 required projects to our chemical battery storage, are you prejudging before we even get to the RFP? What is the art of the possible?
So again, that's all the only required projects that we have listed so far are required by us from the statute. So we have to do those based on what is in the law. But again, we are still open to other projects. We are looking for at least 3 demo projects and hoping for more. So we certainly want to hear about any and every other possible technology family for consideration beyond just what those 3 are listed in statute.
Is there a deadline on when the project has to be finished, either for demo projects or any of the other store scopes?
Yeah, the only deadline that we list in the RFI and that we have right now is the September 30th, 2023. That is the deadline for awards to be made for demo projects. There is no specific deadline at this stage for award completions for demo projects or for any other programs.
Is the 20 million in addition to the 355 million?
Yes. So the 20 million comes from a sort of a separate pool, and that is not included as part of the 355 million. So we start with 355 million, divide it between demo projects and pilot grants, which we'll get into next, and then that amount add 20 million to, and that's the total demo projects fund.
Great. What about non-lithium batteries in which we replace lithium and rare earth minerals with generic ceramic commodity oxides and other materials? I assume that the following question is that included in this?
Yes. So for that 20 million project specifically, the language does call out lithium, but there does seem to still be some potential flexibility, at least with some of the other projects. So we want to hear about ideas like that, certainly in consideration.
Great. I have a couple of sizing questions for you. The first, it's been brought up, the demo initiative is for less than 100 kilowatts, and the next phase is megawatt plus. Many microgrids are sized around 250 kilowatts, which would not qualify for any category. And then a sort of a second question was, for first of its kind, a minimum 5 megawatts is fairly large. The manufacturing for first of its kind must be in place for this size. Would you consider a smaller first of its kind of about 2 megawatts? Or if it has the right levelized cost of storage below the 5 cent per kilowatt hour?
Yeah, there are certainly always exceptions with what we've laid out, and the definitions at this stage, we are very interested in your feedback on them. So if you do find any gaps or any opportunities for additional technologies that might not quite fit in well, that will be essential for us to hear about in the RFI, and that may inform our planning for future funding announcements. So we really appreciate that feedback, and we'll look forward to reading more in your responses.
Great. For more innovative approaches like anchor tenant, is there a template or standard terms and conditions that DOE has developed as a reference point, or will this require new development from scratch?
I'm not aware of much. Eric, do you have any insight on that one?
No, for these more innovative approaches, I'm not aware of any templates that have been developed.
Okay. Are experimental and modeling-based approaches to hazard assessment and design of mitigation system designs considered a scope under this initiative, specifically fire explosion and toxic gas hazards posed by lithium-ion grid-scale systems?
So as defined, we are looking for demonstration projects, large-scale grid-connected demonstration projects. These types of systems are certainly important and might play a role in a demonstration project. But as it's defined currently, right now, a project that just looks at something like that would not be in scope.
Okay. We have a couple of questions. I think some of this we'll get to in the next half an hour, but a couple of questions here on demo projects versus the pilot grants. What's the anticipated breakdown of the $355 million between the demo projects and pilot grants? I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but maybe we can cover it again.
Yep. So right now we don't have a full breakdown. There's going to be meaningful contributions to each. They're going to be two meaningful programs, but we don't have any specific numbers yet. Other than that, they will be broken down from 355, and demo projects has that extra 20 million for the additional project.
What about technology ideas that need R&D? Does that fall under the pilot focus?
So would that be technologies that would require further R&D to be deployable? If we're looking at technology risk that can be addressed through further R&D, that might fall more in the demo initiative section that we just talked about. The pilot grants, which we'll get to, are for the later stage technologies that are basically ready to be deployed almost off the shelf.
How does DOE define first of a kind? Is technology eligible if it's the first time it will be installed at this scale, even if there are smaller pre-existing systems?
I think Eric might have more clarity into how we defined that initially.
Yeah, give me 1 second to make sure. I think we, within the store scale, we provide some guides as to what we would consider eligible in each category. So for example, in the pilot grants section, which is the one following here, we're open to technologies that may have, for example, 1 to 100 megawatts of pre-existing deployments. For this demo project stage, we're interested in first-of-a-kind systems deployed in the field at this scale. So it may have been tested at a smaller scale or at a less level of integration. But again, we are interested in feedback regarding how better to clarify the criteria.
Okay. Can an applicant apply for both a demo initiative and a demo project?
Eric, want to take that one?
So we are interested in distinguishing these two programs as clearly as possible. Certainly if a applicant had different technologies that were at different stages of readiness, they could submit two applications, potentially separate applications to each provision. But we are trying to craft these, we're seeking feedback to help craft these in a way so that a particular technology from a particular innovator would have a distinct provision to apply to.
Okay. Thermal energy storage requires generation to supply AC output. Is it eligible in this program?
So we're proposing that these technologies be part of the metrics for evaluating these technologies is to demonstrate a certain pathway to a levelized cost of storage, which would require bidirectional electrical charging and discharging.
Okay. I thought the demo initiative projects were asking for technologies that are already operational behind the meter, e.g. campus microgrid example, but in the question just answered, that program was pointed to for higher tech risk projects. Will high tech risk projects be funded there?
Yeah, I can try to clarify. I think I just gave that answer on the demo initiative. So we're kind of thinking about a few different paradigms in terms of risk for a deployment project. We're thinking about technology risk. So how much risk a technology has sort of on its own. And we're thinking about more of the broader deployment risk. So institutional or regulatory barriers that are preventing deployment. And as a technology gets more validated and its technology risk goes down, we start to run into the institutional or regulatory barriers more. So for the demo initiative, we are primarily looking for the technologies that might have higher risk at this stage. And inherently, we'll sort of be seeing less so the more regulatory risk for something like a campus microgrid. So if you had to sort of place it into a bucket, the high-tech risk projects, based on how we define them, would go into that demo initiative phase. And I'm looking at the question, so, technologies that are already operational behind the meter, we are looking for the more sort of innovative technologies for demo initiative. So I know that was sort of a lot of concepts, but they're explained as well in the RFI, and Eric might be able to provide any further clarity.
Okay. Would electric utilities be eligible to apply for the demo grants?
Yeah, so we don't have eligibility requirements yet, but as stated in the presentation, we're certainly interested in a wide array of partnerships for demo grants, including among vendors and off-takers. So utilities are certainly of interest as a potential project partner at this stage.
Does the demo initiative address the energy idea to implementation trajectory R&D?
So if you remember from the store scale commercialization chart, I think this is how I'm reading your question, the demo initiative is at that lower end of maturity. So closer to the end of the energy idea, I guess, up to the first starter implementation. But the demo initiative and all the programs are placed along that commercialization curve where they fall in the central strategy. And again, that's laid out more clearly in the RFI document as well.
Great. I think we've got a few other more observational comments that we'll take down, and a few other highly specific questions that we might not be able to answer. I don't know if others on the call have any additional questions for us this time on this provision. Okay. So I think at this point, we have one more question, and then we'll probably turn to a break here pretty soon. But pump storage hydro is more than 80% energy efficient through a full cycle. PHS facilities can typically provide 10 hours of electricity compared to about 6 hours for lithium ion. Will the sustainability of water be given respect in proposals?
Right. So this sort of goes with the supply chain considerations that we're thinking through. So supply chain and general sustainability of the manufacturing process, or of the operational process, is certainly of interest at this stage, and these types of considerations we'll want to hear about. So, thanks.
Yep, and I'll also add that, as we mentioned up front, even if all of the pump storage sites in the U.S. are built out, we still anticipate needing substantially more storage than that. So these provisions are designed to, are intended to advance the technology maturity of innovative storage technologies that do need to be de-risked. So we would consider that in terms of building out the portfolio. And then I can take the last question. Is thermal energy storage integrated with a fossil plant excluded from Bill 41001? I'll go back to my earlier response. We are looking for technologies here that are bidirectional electrical, so electricity in and electricity out, which many thermal technologies are capable of. And we are proposing to use the LCOS as one of the metrics, which does require bidirectional electrical capabilities.
Great. Thanks, Eric and Ben. I think we will pause here and take a break till 3 p.m. Eastern, where we will resume with the rest of the program.
Thanks for the questions.
Great. Well, welcome back, everyone. We're here at 3:05 Eastern. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ben Schwiger from the Office of Electricity to talk more about the pilot grants program. Ben will give a short presentation, which will be followed by a chat via the Q&A. I mean, a Q&A via the chat. Sorry. Take it over, Ben.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Welcome back. So now we're going to get into the third sort of large program covered in the RFI, which is the pilot grants program. All right, so if you remember from the store scale commercialization chart that Eric showed last hour, pilot grants falls at that upper end of market certainty. So we're looking at pilot grants to be able to fund projects that are aimed at furthering deployment. So we're seeing pilot grants as an opportunity for communities to deploy storage for the first time. So at this point, we're past the technology risk. We have a technology that's been validated. We know that it works. And this is the opportunity to work with communities and foster more partnerships to enable greater storage learning and storage deployment learning so that more and more storage can be deployed. We could be funding a wide range of eligible entities. First and foremost, states, tribes, and tribal organizations are of interest. But this program might also be funding institutions of higher education, electric utilities, or private energy storage companies. So quite a range of eligible entities for pilot grants. And again, this is the opportunity for communities to deploy storage for the first time and learn both how to deploy storage and what the benefits are from new storage deployments. There's an emphasis in this program on overcoming regulatory and institutional barriers of deployment. Again, we're past the point of technology risk, and now we're on to the community-focused deployment efforts. We are looking at a range of possible creative mechanisms, which we have listed some in the RFI, and we're hoping to be able to inform more from the RFI and from other efforts that I'll talk about in a moment. And the end goal is to build up these enduring capabilities, analytical, institutional, or financial, so that targeted communities can invest themselves in storage resources and learn these local benefits from resilience and decarbonization, of course, to economic benefits. So going through a little bit of what's in the RFI, here are some program statutory requirements. So as with some other pieces here, this is what's in the law and what we're required to consider. So in our program, some of those entities may be eligible, some set of what's listed there. I listed those on the previous slide, but it's pretty broad across all the folks who may have a stake in storage. And of course, meeting at least one of those objectives listed on the right. So there are 12 objectives there, a lot of which would be sort of considered in storage deployment anyway, but this is a good list to get us started on thinking about what are some of the benefits that we can focus these demonstrations around. Both of these lists are in the RFI as well. All right, so once again, here is the target criteria and where this falls on the store scale. The goal of this program is to build enduring capabilities for targeted communities to invest in storage resources that provide local benefits, resilience, decarbonization, and financial benefits. And we're really interested in feedback on how appropriate it is to target this level of maturity. Again, up until this stage, we are looking at small scale technology systems in behind the meter or campus demonstrations. We're looking at large first of a kind utility scale demonstrations. And now to sort of complete out this strategy, we're looking at deployments to build enduring capabilities and start to solve some of these regulatory and institutional barriers. And how we can use this program to address those barriers is of interest in the RFI, as well as even specifically what some of those barriers are to different communities. So we're really looking for information on those factors as they play into pilot grants. All right, so again, I mentioned interesting mechanisms. We are looking at a range of creative and non-traditional mechanisms for pilot grants. Just in the RFI alone, we asked about cost share grants and cooperative agreements, PIAs, credit enhancements, an energy storage subscription model, institutional support, and a warranty backstop, all of which could be tools to help deploy more storage faster out in communities that may have not been able to deploy them for the first time yet. So this is a really exciting opportunity, and we want to be as creative as possible. So we are considering these mechanisms and more of what you could recommend in the RFI. And importantly, we're also considering an initial prize stage or maybe a design roundtable. So before having any sort of official announcement for this program, we're looking at ways to further engage with you and further engage with our stakeholders on what these interesting mechanisms might look like and how we could possibly structure and creatively structure these mechanisms, and doing so in a somehow competitive way to get some of the best ideas up front so that we can be deploying the most amount of storage and breaking down some of these key barriers that are holding us back from more storage out there. All right, so a lot of this is some repeat from the previous programs, but again, we're interested in feedback and insights on these aspects on the slides. So sufficient award size, portfolio of successful project, and how success can be measured for this program. And that might look quite different than how success is measured for the other two programs. That's what we really want to hear about in the RFI. Use cases and applications for storage at this maturity level as we look at this sort of later end of the commercialization curve. We do talk about the pathway to the 5 cents a kilowatt hour cycle and our levelized cost of storage. That's also important. Which technologies or technology families might fall into a program like this? Given that there might be still a lot that would fall into the other two programs, where's that breakdown of which technologies fall where? What regional factors and partnerships, this is one of the most important places for this question, as we think about specifics to different regions and different communities that could benefit from storage, and then project milestones as well. So we're really excited to hear all of your perspective on these areas and more. All right, so again, we talk about labor unions and workforce organizations and organizations that engage with underserved communities, and innovators in underserved communities. So given that this is the community-focused program, we're certainly quite interested in your perspectives around workforce and Justice 40. So there were opportunities to answer specifically for pilot grants and these considerations. And of course, there's also the entire workforce section and the Justice 40 section to address those considerations in energy storage demonstrations as a whole and across the entire ESEE program. And finally, we're looking at supply chain, and as we're talking about scaling up manufacturing, and demonstrating more and more storage, supply chain considerations become ever important. So we are certainly interested in asking about the availability of domestic, secure, and ethical sources of materials, manufacturing speed, and the kinds of analysis that could show supply chain suitability, and some of those other factors like the availability of domestic materials. And finally, we are certainly interested in cybersecurity as well. So cybersecurity is an important stage, especially as we deploy more and make our ever complex system that much more complex. And finally, just to go through a few final reminders, might be repeat information again, but you could find the RFI on the EERE exchange, and it's also linked in the registration page for this webinar, so you couldn't have missed it. You could submit responses to that energy storage 41001 RFI at ee.doe.gov email box. Again, please include the question numbering in your responses. That will really help us down the line as we collate all of the feedback that you give us and output something that is the best and taking into account all of the possible perspectives that we get. And you can answer as many or as few of the questions as you wish. So there was a lot of questions in that document, and there's certainly no pressure to answer even close to all of them. It's whatever you're comfortable answering and whatever you have thoughts that you want to share on. We will not pay for information provided under this RFI, and no project will be supported as a result of this RFI. Information collected will be used for planning purposes. And while we do not intend to publish any information collected in response to the RFI, we strongly advise against providing proprietary, business sensitive, or confidential information. So those are RFI reminders, and I'll turn it back to Sarah for questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Ben. We have a few that have come in already. Does DOE have a power and energy range in mind for the pilot grant projects?
Yeah, so at this stage, we are keeping it fairly open-ended for technologies that are ready to be deployed. And we do ask about that in the RFI. So we'll be interested to hear from you on sort of the best sizes, the best power energy ranges for maximum impact in communities.
Great. Somewhat similar vein, are the pilot grant projects all anticipated to be long duration?
Eric, maybe can you address this one?
Sure. Across all of these provisions, DOE is proposing to be most interested in technologies that can achieve the Earthshot goals. So yes, we would like to be focused on technologies that have 10 or plus hours of duration, but we welcome comments on that criteria.
Great. I think there's possibly a typo in one of these questions, but I think I'm going to interpret to say, can interested parties apply for validation and piloting as well?
So I think this is similar to another question that was asked. We are trying to structure these programs so that they are distinct. But certainly if an interested party has multiple technologies in different stages of readiness and potentially different applications for them, and they would qualify on their own for each of these provisions, they could apply from potentially be eligible to apply for multiple provisions.
Great. Are fossil-fired technologies off the table?
So our proposal in the RFI would be to redirect technologies that have a very close nexus with generation technologies to other bill provisions that are more focused on those things.
Is there a technology readiness level rating that can be used as a guide to evaluate technologies?
Right. So the store scale that we outline in the RFI does have a sort of, you can kind of map it to TRL, but of course the store scale is more specific to storage technologies. TRL is intentionally very broad, very open-ended to really any kind of technology. And as a result, we wanted to make a scale that could help evaluate storage specifically, and doing so as detailed as possible. So we do ask for feedback on that scale. We certainly want to hear your thoughts, but yeah, that's sort of where we are with the store scale.
All right. We have one other pretty specific question that came in. So I don't know that we'll be able to answer it, but what about using storage and solar canopies to create charging and parking for a large number of heavy duty freight trucks that would otherwise be parked in impacted communities near ports or rail hubs and fueled with diesel?
Right. So that is certainly that is a specific question. And we definitely appreciate these kinds of ideas. So we'll want to hear about those types of applications and use cases in the RFI. But at this stage, we're not able to comment on any specific ideas like that. But we really appreciate the interest. Thanks.
Great. It sounds like we have some confusion over terminology. Fundamentally, pilot, TRL 6, has always been seen as earlier stage than demonstration, which is TRL 7.
Right. So I will note that the names for these programs are actually from the statute. So this is in section 3201 of the 2020 Energy Act. And for the purpose of the RFI, we chose to stick close to what was in statute, but we certainly appreciate the comment on the potential confusion, and we'll see if there's ways to address it.
We have another TRL question here. Is there a technology readiness level rating that can be used as a guide to evaluate technologies?
I think we just hit on that one a moment ago with the store scale,
Yeah.
and that's described more in detail in the RFI.
And I think that probably might apply, Ben, to the following question: what TRL is recommended for the lab demonstration funding programs, which I think is not what we're talking about in this section.
Yep. So the store scale can really be applied to any storage technology, and that's what we were hoping for. Although again, I think by the lab demonstration funding program, may be referring to the joint program, which is what Vinod talked about 2 hours ago now. That's the ESEE resilience, and that is not in scope for the RFI, but certainly there'll be updates on that in the future.
Great. Open the floor. Folks have any other questions on this section? All right, we'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll probably move on to the last item on our agenda. But last call here, if folks have additional questions on the pilot grounds. Oh, all right. Can expected systems that will be online within a year or so count as pre-existing installations to qualify for the pilot program?
So I think this is another specific question, but in general, these opportunities are structured in a way that would be supporting activities that would only occur after an award has been made. That's clear enough.
Okay. Any other last questions for the pilot grant section? All right, great. Well, since we seem to have paused a little bit here in the piece of questions, I think this is a good time to transition back to Eric Shea, who's going to talk about the Rapid Operational Validation Initiative. And we'll follow the same format here where Eric will give a presentation, then we'll have time for Q&A via the chat.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And if we can go to our first summary slide, the RFI talks about rolling in a program known as the Rapid Operational Validation Initiative. And this was first proposed in DOE's FY22 budget to solve a commercialization gap. The issue here is that in order to meet the 2035 clean energy goals, if you work backwards from when these resources would need to be operational, you would need a project financial investment decision by 2032. So 3 years in advance. And then working backwards from that, you would most likely need to have finalized your project design and technology, and then begin obtaining an interconnection and securing manufacturing capacity a couple years ahead of time before that. So that leaves us with potentially fewer than 8 years to get to validate, test, develop, and validate technologies that could be in the ground for 15 to 20 years. Now, as part of these energy storage programs, we have a few congressional requirements. For example, ESEE validation and piloting require a report describing the performance of those programs once every 3 years. And the resilience sections must also help innovative new long-duration energy storage become commercially viable, which is also one of the overarching objectives for all of these programs. So what we're looking to fund is our secure data hubs to collect field deployment data from all ESEE projects and tools to predict the performance and life for a fully developed storage systems. Our end goal are bankable storage technologies. We'd like to get to the point where we could potentially provide 15 to 20-year financial grade performance projections with just 1 year of combined testing, modeling, and validation. Let's go to the next slide. So what we're asking for comment on. So first, we're interested in the kinds of data that project performers would be required to provide. So obviously we need to track the technical performance of these new demonstrations, so performance characteristics at the most basic repeatable unit module or system. We're looking at what frequency of collection would be reasonable. It could be a live feed, it could be weekly, monthly, or quarterly uploads. And we're looking for input on the best way to protect proprietary data to make sure project owners continue to have adequate control over their project data. But given that we have this tool set, this data set, we're also looking at seeing how ROVI could impact commercial transactions. So would models that incorporate learnings from this data, could they inform power purchase agreements and their performance parameters? Could they help the industry establish warranty backstops, or could they facilitate debt financing by providing more certainty on the technical performance of a new technology? And finally, we're also interested in how the outputs from ROVI could facilitate achievement of DOE policy priorities for Justice 40. Examples of this would be how that could this data could increase access to clean energy, how it might enable low-cost capital, and how it could facilitate enterprise creation and assist in creating clean energy jobs and training. So that's a briefer section, but I'll end by recapping our standard reminders. The RFI is available at the link where you most likely found this webinar. The responses are due by 5 p.m. on June 16th, and they need to be emailed to this email address in Microsoft Word or Adobe PDF. I will repeat the request to please include the question numbering because there are many questions, including the number and a letter, if applicable, and it will help us organize and get to organize and incorporate your feedback most effectively. You're welcome to answer as many or as few questions as you'd like. And DOE will not pay for information provided. This is an RFI, and no project will be supported at this stage. We will be using this RFI for planning purposes, and we do not plan to publish any information collected in response to this RFI, but respondents are strongly advised not to provide any proprietary, business sensitive, or confidential information. So with that, I'll turn it back to Sarah to see if there are any questions.
Great, thanks, Eric. Following the format we followed before, if anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat. This is a general question, but does the 20-page limit still stand? The RFI is greater than 30 pages with all the questions.
No, we will not be enforcing a 20-page response limit.
The next question is, when do you anticipate the full RFP to go out? How much time will applicants have to respond?
So we're unable to comment on exact timing of future FOA, but I do encourage people to sign up for the mailing list that you'll see on the next slide to keep informed of any updates. And if there are no more questions, then maybe we can turn it over to Ben to close this out.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Eric, and thanks a lot, Sarah. This has been a really great question and answer session. Really enjoyed hearing the discussion, getting your questions, and seeing so much excitement and engagement for all the different programs that we have been able to talk about so far with the RFI. So on this final slide, there's just a couple little updates bullets, so you can get updates on energy.gov/bill. You can email that list for Office of Clean Energy demonstrations, updates, and engagement to be up to date. And be sure to sign up for the Energy Storage Grand Challenge email list. There'll certainly be updates about future bill storage programs sent to that list. So make sure you're on that. And I think that is probably all for today. So thank you very much all for attending and for your excitement and engagement. A couple times we posted links in the chat to where these slides will be posted. So make sure to check back if you want to reference anything further. And in the meantime, have a great day, and we look forward to your responses. Thank you very much.